Good morning. You have tuned in to What is the Positive? And I just realized as I was saying that the little orange light that said live flashed on in the middle of my sentence. So I'm going to start all over. Good morning. You have tuned in to What is the Positive? Now at least I got the whole line out. And because if you watched Hangouts
The
and
little
they
orange
start the
light that
Hangout
said
and
alive
they're cutting it right
flashed
in the
on in the
middle
middle of
of
my sentence. I'm going to start all over. Good morning. You have tuned in to What is the Positive? Now at least I got the whole lane out. And
Just give me a second. Thank you. Sorry,
no,
technical
no,
glitch.
And you
no
guys thought
problem.
I had problems.
It's called what my technician specialist used to always tell me. This is the problem: user error. And that's okay. It's okay. We all make mistakes with that. Sometimes I just can't get something working, and then afterwards I went, "Oh, no wonder it didn't work." Well, see, there's always an answer to it. It's just that we don't always become privy to what it was. So anyway, thank you. That was kind of an interesting start to a new show here. And before we get any further, I just wanted to make the mention. I'm sure that everybody basically resounds with this one. But if the people watching or the people anywhere that watch this in replay or wherever, at least you can know that we dedicate a few seconds talking about David Bowie, who passed on yesterday. And we lost a great musician and a great artist and a very, very creative man. So if you want to list out in the comment stream what your favorite song is or whatever your thoughts are with David Bowie, feel free to do that. I'm welcoming it here. Personally, I thought that one of his best songs, I have got several favorites, but the one that I will bring up is Ground Control to Major Tom, Space Oddity. It's one of my favorites. So that's my statement on David Bowie. And if you'd like to state your own ideas, you're welcome to do it. So in the meantime, while people are collecting themselves and thinking about David Bowie, now I'm going to try to introduce the people in my green room. So let's start over here with Carlos Savio. Please introduce yourself and tell people basically what you do, who you are.
Hi, I'm Carlos Savio in Las Vegas. I'm a small business management and financial consultant. I'm digitally fluent, uh, self-educated web engineer, proficient in several online programming languages, and I've been accessing the internet almost daily since 1992. That's it.
Very good. Thank you, Carlo. And next, George Stewart.
Hi, everyone. I'm George. I'm a life traveler. My actual main career was seafaring, involved with the oil industry. So I spent a lot of time bouncing around the globe. But now my voyage is about discovery of life, and I guess that's what I'm here. I've got most of my corners have been knocked off, so I hope I've got something to share.
Okay, that's the rounded version of George right there.
Touche.
And we have also with us Shira Hunt. Say hi, Shira, and tell us what you do and who you are.
Hi, I'm Shira. I'm a vibrational medicine therapist and teacher, and I am from Las Casas at this point in time, although my job right now is kind of all over the place since most people are accessing me via the web rather than just locally. So I'm getting to bring what I know and have learned through my own demise to many people for healing and for transformation.
Hey, thank you very much. And put to put some little bit of depth into what Shira does, she does a sound analysis. It's a combination of sound analysis, physical analysis, and spiritual analysis via sound waves. And she's done this for me. And and yes, Misty, come on back in as soon as you want to. That my call was that I invited you into the green room, and that basically meant unless I told you we'd like you to leave before the show starts, I thought you were going to be with us today. So you're welcome to jump back in and be with us and be part of the conversation. And if you'll join in, then we'll let you introduce who you are too, and that can be on the fly. It doesn't matter. But anyway, Shira does a very, very interesting and sound vibrational therapy. And if you are a believer that the entire universe is energy, 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 then you'll maybe look at it a little differently when you say sound vibrational energy most definitely has a bearing and an influence on your physicality and your spirituality and your mentality. So as rough as a description as that is, we will digest that a bit and see what Shira tells me after the show. Oh, this is Misty Lynn came back in, and thank you very much for dropping back in and saying hi. Misty Lynn is one of the hosts of a show called The Death Chicks, and I was kind of uh, anxious when I first watched the show, but it is a great show, and I do not endorse too many shows on mine, but Misty Lynn's The Death Chicks is one to watch. You should try that sometime. So Misty, say hi and tell people a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, Roland. Thank you so much for this invitation and for endorsing our show. My co-host Patty and I started the show because it was blazingly apparent to us how much people fear death. And here we are in the 21st century, and everyone dies, yet we all kind of avoid it, and the dark cloud that seems to come with it. And so we're working to change that. On the other side of things, I'm a life coach focusing on women's empowerment, and I work with women overcoming great loss and grief. And it's really fun working with the Death Chicks. And your show, What's the Positive? My dog alarm. Anyhow, it resonates with me. Sin, responsibility. At the end of the day, when we're at our ends, it doesn't matter what happened. I don't know if I should compete with my dog. I'm going to pass it on, but I think how the listeners, as I'm shouting to overcome my dog, the listeners can understand how sin and responsibility, when you're at the end, forgiveness, it's key. Everyone wants to be loved and in that space. I'm going to pop off for a minute.
Okay, sounds good. And yes, the concept of what you do with your show, The Death Chicks, is very important and serves a very high purpose. And if people can get a handle on how to deal with the concept of death and wrap their brains around maybe the more of the concepts of life, then perhaps all the transition could be a lot easier. And lots said and not enough words to really describe what I'm trying to say. But anyway, so there you have the Death Chicks, and maybe we have here the Life Guys. So we ought to do a show together called The Death Chicks and the Life Guys. And, okay, I'm playing with words. All right, I'm just playing.
Roland,
Yes, sir.
I've got a saying to share with you.
Well, let's hear it.
People are so afraid of dying that they're too afraid to live.
Boy, there's so much truth to that. I could tell right from the very start of your sentence it was going to be profound, but that was nice. So, okay, before we go on, I wanted to acknowledge that Misty Lynn, although she was in the audience, she's now in the green room. But we also have Lolan Fulsang, We Wake, and we're going to talk about him in a moment. Barbara Quick is out there, glad to have you, and several people are coming in, so thank you very much. And just so that everyone knows, because We Wake, people see your name in the audience and they go, oh, Vivek. And they see that, and I'm sure that they're thinking, is that how you pronounce that name? And then we hear, like Zara Altera says it properly, We Wake. And what I think that we want to exemplify with this is that you are a very spiritual teacher, high thinker. And so you have the perfect name, We Wake, and that's how you can remember his name. We Wake. We Wake, that is his name. So he clarified that to me the other day, and so I thought I'd share that with everyone. So now, finally, 9 minutes into our show, let's start the show. And I hope you're having fun out there. If you want to say something about David Bowie, please do. And other than that, I will leave that to you guys. And now, I was thinking before this program started, what are we going to do next week? Because next week is the official start of this show, even though that's a farce because we've been doing it for a month now. But I wanted to have it more of a kickoff, like what this show is going to be all about. And we're figuring that out daily as we come in here and talk about the subject and discuss things. But next week, I decided what I'm going to name my show. It is going to be called When You Wish Upon a Star. Okay, now it's going to catch everybody's attention because everyone's seen the movie Pinocchio, or most of you have, right? Little boy, wooden nose, grows like that, and so forth. So, yes, Pinocchio. By the way, where in the world did they get that name? I mean, would you ever name your son or daughter after the star of that movie? And yet, it's probably the most important, well, one of the most important Disney movies out there, right? And probably one of the most well known. So Pinocchio, I don't know where you got your name, but anyway, it's a marionette son. He's a puppet, a boy, and his nose gets longer when he lies. Now, what pertinence is that to my show? Well, you're going to have to wait till next week. But basically, I'm going to talk about when you wish upon a star, your dreams come true, and why I think it's true. Okay, so that's give you a little bit of food for thought. Spoiler alert! But in the previous weeks, we've talked about a few things leading up to this point today. And one of them about 2 or 3 weeks ago was that guilt serves no purpose. So we covered that, and I won't get into it because we could relaunch on that and spend the entire 50 minutes left on that. But also the following week we did finding fault, guilt, and blame are basically basically better left out of your consciousness, and we talked about the reasons why. Okay, and then last week I believe we renamed the show because of something that George said. That was basically, George, do you want to repeat the actual line that you said? I can look it up.
Either everything is divine or nothing is. Make your choice and live your life accordingly.
Everything is divine or nothing is, and I believe that I choose the concept that we are all divine. Because how can it not be? How can it not be? If God is divine and God made us, then everything that God makes is as perfect as He is. We are all perfect, and under God's eyes, we are divine. So that's an easy little drop-down equation for me. That A equals B, B equals C, etc. A equals C. So I choose the divinity concept. Now, that's not to raise myself up on a pedestal or anything. That's ridiculous. But I don't think to be divine, you have to be raised on a pedestal. I don't think that I see God as being on a pedestal. So, really, let's all adjust our thinking and realize that divinity is the natural state of humanity as well as divinity. And in the meantime, we'll have a conversation for another day of what the difference between divinity and humanity is. But that's another one. But what we would like to do today is suggest for you that we tackle this concept of what sin is, what forgiveness is, and the concept of the responsibility that causes people to directively say, it was your fault, it was my fault, gee, I did it, I'm guilty, and all these things that are surrounding the concept of blame and guilt, etc. We arrived at this concept of forgiveness. And we have heard people talk about forgiveness all the time. Everyone says, yeah, we have to forgive. Have a lot of love and forgiveness. And so even though when we're listening to that, we know that the words mean something significant. But what do they really imply? So we're gonna tackle that today. I wanted to start off with a concept that the word sin is not what people necessarily think it is. And basically, when you think of sin, what do you think of? My cohorts in the green room can answer this. We can start off with a concept of what you think sin means. Anybody?
Sure. I think the greatest sin that was ever created on this planet was the interpretation that the religious foundations created around that word, that we are sinners and we must be cleansed, forgiven, purified. I think that that's the greatest sin that was ever committed on the planet, is the fact that we were told we were sinners. There are at least 2 scriptures that I can name off the top of my head. John 10 something, it's a 10th chapter, where it was written, is it not written in your law that I said ye are gods? And there is another scripture that is almost identical to that in the Psalms. And it says the same thing. I say ye are gods, and you are the children of the highest. What happened to those scriptures? How did we interpret that we were sinners out of that kind of language?
Can I express
that's my idea.
Go ahead, George. What was that?
I say I have a cynical comment or a cynical thought about that, looking at history. Follow the money.
Okay, well, that's a little bit detached from the concept where we were going. However, you've identified where it extends out to the concept that people detach themselves from what they really are, who they really are, and they focus on what they think is important, and it ends up being the monetary, the collective wealth and abundance that they think they have to grab onto. For what reason, I'm really not sure. And that's some measurement of their success and their happiness in life, which is one of the biggest fallacies in the universe. So we all know that happiness, or maybe we don't know, but we all think, or we've heard the phrase and we are inclined to believe that happiness comes from within and is not in the wealth that you collect. Even though some people play it like he who has the most toys wins. And it's okay. I don't even want to talk to that person.
Until they win. Until they win. That's
until they win. And they realize that the game had nothing.
That's it. They get it. I was a hospice nurse for 10 years, and one of the things that I uncovered with many of my patients, it was sad to me. I mean, I had one man who had everything. He was in his mid-30s, dying of cancer, and he said to me what he would not say to his family. You mean to tell me I've created all this, and now I'm going to die? And what do you say to that? Here you are. Yeah, you're the winner, and now life is leaving you. Literally, the breath of life is leaving him. And I feel like people get it once they win, and I think that's where we are culturally, is that we've had it all now. We've all been at the top of our game at some point in our life, and were we any happier because of the stuff that we created, the jobs that we had, the titles that we carried? No. So,
That's a great story, and I have one that's almost, you'll hear it and say, that had nothing to do with what Shira said or the subject of the conversation today. But although I think it does, because what happened is the subject of this story basically came to that conclusion that the wealth was not everything before she died. And this is what happened to her. She was declared as a lady that, as a friend of mine, through an actual experience, told me the story, and I actually included the story in the book that I wrote about my own experience. And so it became immortalized by that. But the story is basically that there was an elderly lady, not that age, in late 60s or so, who was dying of cancer, and they had been through the hospice thing, they'd been through the oncology trips and everything else, and so she was in this basically a retirement home for those who are dying, and she came to the conclusion, the doctors said, look, you've only got a month or so to live. That's it. So when they told her this, she reanalyzed her life, and she ended up basically detaching herself from all her wealth, which was substantial. She wasn't a millionaire, but she had some assets. She gave everything away, got rid of stuff, and then within the rest home where she was situated to end her life, she started doing things for other people who were suffering. She was baking stuff, she was making gifts, she was throwing parties. She became like a gang leader for goodness, if you will, within her little community inside the hospice. And lo and behold, she went to her next oncology meeting, and they couldn't find any.
Yeah, exactly.
they couldn't find any cancer. It's like, oh, a miracle. Boy, she was rewarded for something in life. And so, people don't see the equation that she changed the vibration of her entire being, gave away her stuff, realized that it wasn't important, and basically reversed what was causing her illness in the first place. So,
She aligned her spirit.
exactly, she got aligned. And we have this ability to, whenever we actually want to, reattune ourselves and adjust our frequency. However, how does it happen? Through our thoughts, through what we think, and therefore, beyond that, what we do. But it's the heart and soul, right? Whatever their heart and soul is, that's what you're going to think, that's what you're going to express. And that's why we want to delve a little bit deeper into what we are thinking. Misty, did you have something to add to that?
Well, sure. Just I love that it's coming around to the death talk. I think it's great anytime people can say the word death and can say, yes, I'm going to die. I'm okay with that. I think we're moving forward and to realize that it's a step closer to living more fully. Sin in the original Hebrew meaning is just a miss. It simply means to miss the mark. So we're walking life and we go down a path and, oh, this is not the right path for us. So that's a sin. We need to connect with our heart again and our love and walk forward in that way. And your story, Roland, and also the one Shira shared is our stories about that. And at the end of life, we realize that that's the only thing that's important is that we lived from our heart. And I think it's very interesting. Give and forgive are very close. The word give is in the word forgive. And when we're walking and living our lives with an open heart, giving to others, not thinking of improving our lot, not allowing the ego to be chatty. This is when we're living and loving. And forgiveness. I have a story about forgiveness. I don't think I'll have time to share it today, but it was huge. One of the biggest releases I've ever had in my life. So if you haven't experienced the miracle of forgiveness, I encourage you to just to try it. And I always tell people, don't believe me, just test it for yourself.
Thank you very much for that. And we're going to delve deeper into the concept of forgiveness momentarily. But to wrap up this concept of sin, you basically said it just a few minutes ago, because the definition of sin, and I can read it right off this report that I'm watching, and I'm not going to worry about where this came from. It's in Facebook, but it's not one of those things that's like, oh, it's in Facebook, it can't possibly be true. This is actually a published document regarding the definition of the Hebrew word sin. So I'll read you some of this. The first thing that it says is the original word, it means to sin. You know what? I'm going to share the screen on this. Hang on one second. That's the best way to do this, I believe. So everyone can see that okay, right? So as we get to the top here, it says the original word sin means to miss. And then beyond that, it says it doesn't mean to commit something wrong. It simply means to miss, to be absent. Now, let's see. We could read on, and there's a lot of great stuff. Like down here, it says the root word means forgetfulness. So I want to grab that on for a second and discuss it. So the concept of sin is forgetfulness and being absent and to miss or miss the mark. So when you wrap that up, what could that extrapolate out to? I read that as we are missing, because actually we are spiritual beings. As much as we want to be only human, being only human to me it's a lie, it's a farce. We are spiritual beings. And now some people aren't ready to handle that. It's like what you see is what you get, and facing reality and stuff like that. But I will opt for the concept that we are spiritual beings. Now, if we are, then being only human is actually forgetting who we are in the higher level. So for a while as human beings, we have agreed to forget that we are spiritual beings, and we're down here playing house as human beings. That's kind of how I look at life. But as we are, since we have forgotten and we are absent, being human is a sin because we are absent-minded of being spiritual. So that's the sin going on. And so sin is not something that we do wrong as humans. It's simply the state that we are born in, and that makes sense when they say you were born in sin. The concept is you're born absent of the consciousness of being a spiritual being. So no wonder we can't figure out these things about spirituality and dual lives and reincarnation and oh my God, that's too much above me. That's because you're absent as a spirit. We're not supposed to necessarily understand how that works. We are here to be human. So this reverts back to what Cheryl was saying about the assignment of what sin means community-wise and religion-wise, and the use that we have as human beings to dominate other people's feelings and senses and everything they do by using the words sin and right and wrong and goodness and badness and qualifying it in human terms and not the spiritual sense. Did you want to add something, Shara?
I was just going to say that that's a beautiful way, the forgetfulness. There's a couple of things, because to me a big piece of our spiritual evolution is remembering the spirit that we are. And so that forgetfulness plays right into that. But I think another big piece that is really powerful that you are doing right now, that is some of the major confusion for people around the Bible and the scriptures, is that I don't think that the parables and the stories in the Bible were ever intended to be taken literally. That they are actually stories that relate to our conscious, unconscious, our awareness, our lack of awareness. If we begin to pull those stories apart in a way that we see ourself in them in some way, shape, or form, we get a whole different translation and a whole different information. And so what you are doing right now is a really empowering tool for people to begin to take scriptures and literally dig deeper for a different understanding or meaning.
Well, it has occurred to me for over half my life that people were always saying, I got to find my head, man. I got to figure out who I am. I have to find myself. And it's like, well, good luck, you know. And in the meantime, it's like, what is the essence of finding yourself? And to me, it's like discovering the inner essence that is your higher self and expressing it as a human now, in the present, in the now, the best way we can. That's the best way we can. That's the best thing we can do. You said something a little while ago, and it just reminded me of something that it comes out of the Bible in several places in Hebrew text and so forth. It says God does not remember our wickedness. Now, it was that word struck me when you said it. I was like, remember is a word. God does not remember our wickedness. So when we look at that, basically what he's saying is, okay, God doesn't hold the past against us. He does not remember our wickedness. He rejoices in what we do that is good. So he focuses, he does exactly what Jesus says, turn the other cheek, away from the wickedness and towards what is good. So when Jesus said turn the other cheek, he was saying, be godlike. You don't have to remember the past. And the past is where everyone has all their baggage, all the stuff that they can't let go of, and the things that they torture themselves and others with because of their remembering what happened in the past. And we won't even get into anxieties about the future yet. Because forgiveness all has to do with the past, right? Okay, let's see. George?
So, two thoughts. We're discussing this from a very adult point of view. My perception is that we come into this world as children, absolutely pure, and we don't know anything about it. The Jesuits have an expression, give me the boy and I'll give you the man. They can condition, and parents do it unwillingly, unwittingly all the time. We condition ourselves into sin and wrongness because it's what we're culturally raised to believe is right.
Let me know when you want to chime in, Carlo, if we're running
I'm
you
fine.
over.
I'm fine.
But George, could you repeat that phrase again? Because there's something that I was thinking as you said that, the actual quote.
Or the Jesuit quote, give me the
Yeah,
boy and I'll give you the man.
yes. I have an idea what they were thinking. Give me the boy and I'll give you the man. But I have another take on the whole thing. Give me the boy, the pure person, before the effect of mastering by adults and parenting and the conditioning of culture and society. Give me that boy, and he's more of the actual man than when he grows up after all the conditioning and stuff. And he doesn't actually need the conditioning to be a better or whatever man. He
Yeah.
is a different man, changed because of the influences of people. However, that's not making the man. In the eyes of the adult, they say, well, this is what we can make, devise and add to this person to make him resilient, to be able to withstand being a victim as a human being. And to me, the whole concept of victim takes the entire argument and it goes right down the drain. So that's kind of like another subject. But
Well, I think it ties into what you were saying before, Roland, because the idea of God turning the other cheek, and just to take that a step further, some believe, as I do, that God doesn't even see that. Doesn't God is only love. Hence, the idea of fear and doing something wrong. It's non-existent.
Yes.
It's created by our minds and our thoughts, and this idea that our parents probably instill, oh, don't do that, or don't do this. And then, as you said, with the child, we're born pure, and slowly the fears and concerns that we're all brought up with, and we're told something enough so many times, and we believe it, and we walk around with that fear. I did a very interesting experiment with my daughter when she was a baby, and so she would be on a tabletop or somewhere potentially dangerous, and instead of going towards her when she was nearing the edge, I simply let her go near the edge and observed, of course, in a place where I could catch her if she fell. But she never went over the edge, so she, as an animal, knew what was safe. So that was one of my little experiments to help me believe what I believe, or perhaps what I know in my heart to be true. So there you go.
That's.
that was a nice contribution. Thank you very much for that.
I
Um,
want to honor Misty in that, because she just spoke what was burning inside of me. Misty, I love it. I love it. I love it. That ultimately there is no demonic edge to us. There is no evil. There is no, this is our manifestations. What we decide is out there. But as you say, God is love, and that's all any of it is. And when we begin to perceive that way, our world changes. That we don't condemn someone, and we don't blame someone, and we don't punish someone for what we think is a mistake. When we see from the eyes of God, we realize there is no mistake. Oh, this is just another manifestation of love. How can I be present in that?
Go ahead,
we,
George.
we said that everything is energy. The highest frequency of energy is love.
Yes.
If you look at that way, there's your answer. Whatever the question is, love is the answer. Not punishment, love.
I think it's been expressed simply and easily, time and time and time again, throughout biblical teachings and throughout everything non-biblical, from various cultures and religions around the world, and they express that love is the answer, and there's very little disagreement in that. And then, of course, there are people who resort to hate and war and anger and these other negative things. But when you consider what is the positive, it's basically saying we have the option to choose this instead of that. So, in the midst of all this negativity, uh, why does it happen? I have my thoughts, but why the negativity? Why the pain? Why the suffering? Anybody?
Because we choose it. That's the only reason. because in every instance, three people can be experiencing the exact same thing and they will all feel something different based on their filters or their ideas or their concepts. And so if we decide to be hurt, if we decide to be angry, if we decide to be blaming, that's our choice. That's our choice. And in the same moment, we can decide to release and be happy, or to have acceptance.
Absolutely. And here's my take on it further. The choices that we make as human beings are based on fear because we think that we are vulnerable, which completely negates the concept of what we just talked about earlier, divinity and the fact that everything is okay, it's all good, there's no right or wrong, it's all good, it's part of the universe, and everything is part of the expression. So if we feel vulnerable, it's because we don't believe that we are divine, that we are deserving, that we are in goodness incarnate, or that we even have any control over our experience. And that's when we fear, and that's when we start to judge, that's when we get angry, because we fear the loss of something in our lives. And there is no loss. I mean, it's imaginary, if you will. And so if people would listen to me and say, I am destitute, I don't have a job, I'm about to get thrown out of my apartment, you can't tell me that this isn't real. And I would look at them and say, yeah, a nice creation, that's the way you chose to express your life. Yes, it's real for you. However, it's not the higher truth or higher reality. But as part of freedom of expression and free will, even the biblical God gives us the opportunity and the power to do just that, and that is to perform badly and negatively if we so choose. That's part of our choice that we can make. We have the choice of being exemplifying goodness and love, or negativity and anger and hurt and sorrow and worry and all those things. So we can see that the
Roland?
Yes.
If anybody's not sure about that, as regards whether that what you've just said is true, I recommend that they read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. This gentleman was incarcerated in the Nazi concentration camp for 4 years. Actually, he was in 4 of them and survived. And one of the things that he said was, although we cannot control our circumstances, we can control our reactions to them. And that's a perception. It's a choice, and that's the ultimate choice that human beings have.
Part of being human, I look at it like this. If God created the heavens and the earth and the universe and the people, etc., in some way, shape, or form, everything was perfectly fine upon creation. And if everything was perfect and divine, it can't go wrong. There's no way for it to receive some kind of a virus to bleed out into the universe and become Satan and become negativity and etc. All these stories that we make up about things. And if that's the case, then what makes these things okay? What makes it acceptable? Because we can look back on it and see that is the way our spirits are expressing. And because of the expressing of that, and because of the experience that I'm witnessing from where I am now, I can develop a deeper feeling about what I love, what I don't like, what I'm not attracted to, what I am attracted to, and that affects every choice that I make in my life. And therein lies the opportunity to create our experience now, because we have this polarization of what we like, what we love, what we are attracted to, what we want to do. That is contained in the choices that we have to make as gifted by God. If you want to believe in God, if you want to believe in the universe has its ways, well then you can look at it like that and just say, oh, everything was meant to be and everything is perfect. You're going to come to the same conclusion if you gave the title of God to this higher power. So it's all the same, whether we call him God or not.
Yes.
I know that was kind of a run, wasn't it?
It's all good.
You're on a roll, Roland.
Let's come around to one thing again, because the thing that I'm very much aware of is the concept of forgiveness. When you say forgiveness, forgive and forget. Well, first of all, no one's going to forget what happened to them completely. It's always going to be there. It's somebody's going to remember. Somebody's going to remind you. It's going to be written down. It's written in your soul that something happened. Okay, so what's the best you can do? What is the very best you can do regarding an experience in the past, and try to come to terms with it now and moving on so that we don't remember this wickedness from our past? What's the best we can do?
It's a simple mantra that says, that was yesterday, this is now.
Mm,
I think
beautiful.
that's a fabulous tool, is to remember that it's gone. It's yesterday. It's no longer a part of your present existence. And what it's this thing that is vivid in my mind, the thing that they call baggage. When you go to a psychologist and says, "Yeah, you're carrying a lot of baggage with you," and I've been told that a number of times, and my ex-wives have been told the same thing. But anyway, you're carrying a lot of baggage into this relationship, and by golly, it's gonna bite you in the rear and so forth. But it's like, how do you let go of the baggage? So there are various tactics or strategies to release. And depending upon who you are, all of them work. Some people use yoga, some people use NLP, some people use prayer, some people use uh, exercise. But whatever it is that takes their attention away so that they're not remembering the wickedness or the negative event, then they're doing something positive. So there's a simple plus and minus concept. And I'm not talking about avoiding the truth or just ignoring something that you have to attend to or something like that. Those things don't necessarily go away. They're still there when you wake up from your little temporary dream. But as far as where you're holding it in your spirit, some people don't realize that even the things that are bugging them, if you apply the concept as Shara and some people have said, apply love. And George said, love is the answer. Even God says, love thine enemies. So whatever your problem is, if you apply the concept of love, it's going to get better. And people don't realize that when you're sitting there worrying about the bills or worrying about a condition or a relationship, you are not applying love. You can't have the two vibrations at the same time. You can't worry and be loving. You can't be angry and be loving. You can't be fearful and be loving. You can try, and you can have those emotions battling yourself, but when you are deep in fear, that comes first. You're dealing with the fear, and you to polarize back into loving is a completely different vibration. Eventually, when
Mhm.
you switch and come around to the loving, that's because all the fear has been relaxed for a while and you can move into the state of love. So if you get into the practice of seeking the love, in other words, what is the positive, you can reverse the polarity of your being. That's the energy that you're putting out into the universe, and that's damn well what you're going to be attracting to.
Hey, Roland.
Yes, sir.
One thought going back to either everything's divine or nothing is. If we stand in that place of everything is divine, then there is no negative, there is no bad, and therefore there's nothing to forgive. It's all our perception.
That is the statement that I've been looking for since we started the show. And that is that when you look at things, if we are working at the law of allowing, in other words, being accepting of the things happening, we don't have to like everything or be behind everything, but we do have to accept. And when we accept something, it's like, okay, I accept this. That's without the negativity, or at least with the negativity reduced to the greatest extent that we can, and accept the concept. When we do this, we're not harboring negativity. Therefore, with that, there's nothing to forgive because there's no personal damage incurred, and it's something that we're carrying that we don't want to, so forth. There's nothing to forgive. So if we achieve a higher state of say, enlightenment, then we get to the point where even when something happens in your life, or something is insulting, or something is definitely uh, damaging to your person, you'll not take offense to it because you're not absorbing the concept of guilt, blame, who's at fault, and the responsibility thing. We are allowing, we say, okay, this is what happened, this is what you did, now where do we go from here? And by not internalizing it and not hanging on to the negative, we turn immediately to the positive, think proactively, solution oriented, and progressively as far as what we will do about our situation, and that is being polarized positive.
Right.
Anybody?
Sure. There's a couple of things that come to mind. First, in reference to all the tools you were giving earlier. In order for a person to be able to use those tools, we have to first come into awareness. And I think this is one of the biggest issues that we have culturally, is that our attention is out there on everything. We have to be able to slow down and begin to ask the questions, begin to be really aware what we're thinking, what we're feeling, to be allowed to be afraid, to see that as part of being human, not a problem, so that when the fear comes up for us or that negative thought comes up for us, we can face it head on. We can hear it. We can listen to it. And then we can say, well, why would I feel that? This is one of the things. We're afraid to ask the questions because we're afraid, one, we're not going to have answers, or the answers that we get we're not going to like. And either of those don't work for us. And so we have to begin to be allowing, completely allowing of ourselves. This is going to make it possible for us to be allowing to others. And when you were speaking about not taking it personally, not being like a front on you when somebody else says something, the only way that can happen is that you are secure enough within yourself, that you bring the love to yourself enough first, that you understand that when another speaks, even pointing their finger at you and blaming, that it's their opinion, it's their stuff, and that ultimately all this is an opportunity for you to allow them to have their opinion. Now, if somebody says something and it strikes me as being real, then boy, I better get inside and work. But if somebody says something to me and I know that's not part of me, I'm just like, oh, I get that's what you think. That's cool. That's it. That's what you think. I don't have to agree with it. This is literally losing the need to be validated, losing the need to be right. To me, this is evolutionary progress, is not being tied to what others think, what others say, what the rules are. There are all kinds of rules. I mean, this is exactly why it's so hard for us to see ourselves as other than a sinner, because from the point of birth, we've been made wrong. No, 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 no. That's what the child hears the first 3 years of his life. And, this is, the baby doesn't know the difference between what you're doing is wrong and you are wrong. And so the baby becomes wrong about everything. And then he has to try to remember his perfection, his beauty, his value, because it's been stripped from him, from the time he was born. So there are so many facets to this, but I think the first thing is for people to begin to slow down. Be aware of how you're feeling, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to hurt. Don't be afraid to feel bad. Don't be afraid to feel fear. This is normal. It's human. And we're supposed to feel all of it, not just the bliss and the joy and the happiness. We're supposed to feel it all. We've not been told that. We've not been given that gift that we're going to feel pain sometimes. Boy, we're going to feel it. It's life. It's life. And Panache Desai says it's a miracle to be able to cry. It's a miracle to be sad. And I believe that. This is human. And it's part of our beauty.
The distinction between humanity and spirituality in the higher sense is that human emotion and things are not things that we can experience or even understand or express as pure spirit.
Sure.
We understand these things because we are human. However,
That's why
beyond
we came
that,
here.
it's like
It's a
we're not going to understand what pain someone else is going through unless we understand what pain is. And if we've had some pain, we understand pain better. We're not going to understand what emotional trauma is unless we've really been through something that is traumatic. And then we have an opportunity of expressing a compassion for someone else. We don't feel compassion unless we understand what it's all about. And from that point, it's like after a while, we understand that people devise suffering for themselves and they go through these things. And when they do that, then that is something to be compassionate for because we're doing it to ourselves. And I know that that's a simple way of saying that we take responsibility for our own lives, but that's the real case of it. And the moment the people take the stand of like, well, not me, it's you, that, and they start pointing outside themselves, they're really missing the boat. They're being absent. That's a sin.
Yeah.
That's the sinful move, that they're not being who they really are. It's said in the Bible, in some phraseology, when they're talking about the uh, the promised land and the people thereof, they're basically saying, you will forget your heritage. You're going to forget who you are. And then in the latter days, you will remember or be reminded who you are. And that's basically the trip of every single spirit on this planet, every human being on this planet, that we forget who we are as spirits, come into this human life, have these extraordinary experiences, and then we'll be reminded at the end run who you are. And maybe some people refer to that as death, but I consider it a reuniting with my inner self, my higher self, and becoming whole again in reality.
For many
Well,
people, it happens before death, and I think Misty probably has some really beautiful stuff to say about that
Go,
because,
go right ahead.
yeah,
thank you, Sarah. I was just on the edge of my seat wanting to jump in on that. Um, uh, so my brand is bittersweet blessing, and being human and having these feelings that we often run from. Um, what we need to do is turn and embrace them and say, like for instance, what brought me here and to bittersweet blessing was the loss of my mother, and I experienced such incredible depth of feeling. I was in awe, and awe. The word awe comes from God and just being in awe at life and being human. And for me, this and other losses that really kind of rip your heart open and your whole world that's busy life, your 3D world kind of goes flat. And this is an incredible opportunity when we have these major losses or deep feelings of any kind to remember who we are and to feel that beauty that's within being human and to have our heart touched deeply. And even it might be through anger or fear or sadness, but when we're really feeling strongly, this is our opportunity. When we walk towards it and allow it and sit with it on our lap as we would a young child and love it and be like, what is it? Explore it. Be curious about it and just let it be. And this is when we touch home base, touch God, touch spirit, touch stone. It's a beautiful saying. And this is where we can truly connect with our aliveness. And from this space, we know that, and we know that whatever comes our way, we can handle.
I love it. And I would add to this because a lot of people would consider the confronting of issues and negative thoughts that they have something that's like, well, you've got to face up to it. You've got to square off and face your challenge and beat the challenge or struggle against it or fight fire with fire or, go to war basically. And I want to make it clear that we definitely here are talking about applying the concept of love and allowing to any circumstance and not facing up to the problem. In other words, when you come up defensively and say, I'm going to face it and I'm going to stand here and by golly, I'm going to keep standing after that's done and bring it on, and you face it like that, that becomes a negative charge which you are challenging your issues with. That's not applying the concept of love. So to be distinguishing, the two things is very, very important. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think what Misty was referring to too is that, we tend to think of like angry emotions as dragging us down and being less empowering than happy or joyful emotions. But the truth of the matter is, if we are expressing and releasing them, they carry as much power as the joy does. It's when we go into restriction or resistance that it becomes ugly for us, and it wears us out, and it pulls us down. But the expression of those emotions is human, and we need to be able to do that and just let it flow, bring it out, find a healthy way to express it. And it carries as much power when you are expressing a negative, sad, or remorse or grief. You will emanate as much power as you do in joy and happiness if you use it healthy.
That makes sense. That makes total sense. And I'm glad you brought that up to express that, because the concept of grief, we definitely don't want to imply that it's not right to cry and that you don't have to, or it's not right to be hurt by something and be angry for some period of time and feel that way and embrace that feeling. And it's not the type of thing where you have to pass judgment and say, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's justified, I'm wrong. All of a sudden you're wrong for feeling the way you do about something that you consider wrong, and how is that justifiable? So,
Roland,
yes.
may I jump? Okay. For those of us that are old enough to remember what it was like to tune in a radio, where you had to move the dial, okay, when we vibrate attack thoughts, other people read it. And we limit ourselves by giving off those attack thoughts. And the attack thought could be as basic as grief. The grief is perhaps not the loss of something, but our ego's loss of access to something. See, going back to, and please don't bleep me for this, going back to the rise and the fall of the Roman Catholic Empire, the ordained sold the idea of sin to the disciples so that they would go through that channel for forgiveness. And using the analogies, we cannot really change the limitations we set on ourselves. And some of those attack thoughts are, don't do this, or don't say that, or don't do this, or don't say that. Limits us. But what we learn to do is create new limitations of which we can function from. So within this, my question in general is, when we forgive, do you think we really accept full closure, or do we hang on to it?
Can I jump in on that, because there's a point
Go ahead, George.
we're missing here. One of the biggest issues here that I perceive is that, and Shira referred to it when she's talking about pointing out there, this separation and duality, the me and the it, the separation, there's the big illusion. Because if we're all made of the same stuff and everything's divine, separation and duality is a total crock. It doesn't exist. So what's to forgive? You're forgiving yourself. What are you hating? You're hating yourself. It's not something we're raised with. We see it in this three-dimensional world as though it's just, there is this me and them. It doesn't exist.
Well, let me push back on that a little bit. The wall in back of you, may I?
Go ahead.
The wall in back of you, George. Mm-hmm. If you firmly accept, if your ego firmly accepts there's no duality, if you would put your hand to that wall, would it pass through, or would you be limited? So it's while the duality doesn't exist. We're all part of the same consciousness.
Yes.
It's our egos that limit us
Mm-hmm.
into these attack words, attack thoughts, attack words. And so we come to a situation, and graphically I'll say it by the temperature of our mind and the color of our soul, so that we begin to judge other people, their outsides by our insides. So what I'm tying together is that we could talk about the ability for this we are all together. But yet when we leave this conversation, we're individuals.
I think maybe what George was addressing, Roland, this is the piece that I emailed to you, the forgiveness foregone, the concept that I embrace. And rather than the hardcore reality, what you are talking about, Carlo, George is talking more about the in-depth spiritual aspect of viewing our world from a place of oneness. And so for me, what ends up happening is that I now understand that nothing in my world ever happened by accident. And I had a really traumatic childhood, really painful, abusive, traumatic childhood. But when I look back at it now, I understand. I see the depth of what happened to me. And I know that at every moment that I was suffering abuse, my soul was calling out for alignment. My soul was calling me to say every time that I got hit, I love you, I love you, I love you, because I am compassion and I am love. As the child, I couldn't get that. You know, as the child, I was too scared. I had already been indoctrinated with the fear of the one hitting me, okay? But ultimately, what I know now when I look back is my soul. It wasn't the hitting that hurt me. It was the being out of alignment with my spirit that was hurting me. It was me not being able to view this soul in fear and anger lashing out. It was me not being able to hold the concept of the God that was in the room with me. And so in that space, nothing that ever happened to me in my world was an accident. Every bit of it was an opportunity for me to come back into harmonic resonance, to align with spirit and ask, to be aware enough to ask in that moment, what is this moment asking of me? What am I being in this moment? That's what we have to embrace now in the midst of this shift and change. We have to become so clear that everything that happens to us, we ask, Spirit, what is being asked of me in this moment? So that we view it all from the eyes of God. And so if I know that nothing was done to me and that it was all with purpose and reason, what would I ever need to forgive? Nothing.
So
There's
I'm going to steal.
Okay, please, 1 second. I want to clarify, although I use the word pushback, I use it in a general sense. It wasn't pushing back on George, it was pushing back on the finite parts of the concept.
The concept. I understood that too. And here's the thing, and why I keep coming back to this concept. By the way, a lot of great comments going on in the comment stream, and many things that I very well would have highlighted had I been two people, and I would have incorporated it into the conversation. And so I want to add a couple things here, and then we'll finish up this conversation. But Lowell Ann Fulsang wanted to say something to Shira, and basically says, I couldn't agree with you more on your message regarding sin. And she also asked the question, which we're not going to get around to today, but maybe we can address this in the future. What is the effect on personifying divine love? And so it's a deep question. And of course, right in our green room, Misty Lynn was saying, and she was mentioning what Shira said, accept the negative as it comes, allow it and honor it, love it, self-acceptance and full acceptance of others, and all that happens will shift us back to love.
Yes.
And so that may not answer everyone's question about what to do about a specific situation, but it sure answers the question on what we can do. Because if you apply this to whatever your situation is, you're going to come out with a positive solution. You're going to come out with a positive vibe. And the answer will present itself, which is there inherent to the universe in the first place. It will come. So in general, that's the answer. Now, easily said, harder to do. And that is the point of it. You know, we come up with solutions all the time and ideas that are really profound. Very, very simple. Love is very simple. However, it's not always that easy. And the not easy part is always, always human. So let's be human, not to worry about it. And remember that forgiveness is a great concept, but that when we reach the extremities of forgiveness, we reach the extremities of allowing in ourselves, and we realize that forgiveness really, deep inside, forgiveness isn't even necessary in the first place. And that, for today, is what exactly is the positive. Thank you, everybody. We're going to say goodbye for now. We're 6 minutes over. And thank you for joining us on What is the Positive. If you have any questions or comments regarding the conversation or extended questions regarding anything that we've said, please drop it in the comment stream and we'll get back to you soon. Thank you very much, and good day, everybody.